As we get closer and closer to the middle of the 2022 Formula One calendar, it feels like we're starting to get a familiar story of early skirmishes for wins and a Ferrari championship charge descending into complete and utter dominance for their rival. And just like the real sport, the latest Codemasters game in the Formula One franchise brings new cars, new tracks and new ideas, but ends up feeling like it too is reading off a previously used script. Don't get me wrong though, there is still plenty that is new within F1 22 that evolves and enhances the game, and that starts with the cars themselves. Codemasters has worked to faithfully reproduce the new generation of cars as each team has grappled with the dramatic overhaul of the sport's aerodynamic regulations. This has led to the already iconic Ferrari sidepod scoops, to McLaren and the Williams with their tightly packaged rear ends, and the radical zero pods design of the Mercedes, even if that is looking like a one-off design, and they all look great in the game. The only shortcoming, and this is a very forgivable one, is that the Aston Martin included is the old A-spec, and not the so-called Green Bull B-spec car that they revealed a couple of races ago. All of these brand new cars look fantastic, but for many players of the series, they're going to feel pretty similar to drive in F1 22, especially if you're leaning on some of the many assists that the game offers. We've been reviewing the game on Xbox Series X, and we've been playing with the Thrustmaster TX Leather Edition wheel with the T-LCM load cell pedals. It's a trusty, well-established combination, and with this in my grasp, the handling feels tight and responsive, rewarding assertive braking and turning timing in the vein of F1 2021. But there's some added challenge here that you will want to be aware of, and you want to take this into account. You'll need a much more deft touch on the throttle coming out of corners, especially on the slower turns of a circuit or when you've been bouncing across the curbs with the 2022 car's much stiffer suspension. Then again, you can also make up a lot of time if you Charles Leclerc it across Imola's Variante Alta chicane. Even if you don't end up spinning out, there can be a costly penalty for being a bit too rambunctious on the curbs, with the relatively new feeling appearance of underfloor damage that I don't remember being punished by in F1 2021, and so it seems that there's new ways to hurt your race. So much of F1 22's handling and physics though is smothered by assists in the game's default settings. This makes the game about as accessible as you could possibly hope for it to be, with auto braking and stability control in particular, and a new adaptive AI system that is meant to keep you in the action by bringing the racers ahead back towards slower players that are sticking with casual difficulty. This isn't something that I was able to meaningfully test for this review, and to be honest, I would suggest that you should do yourself a favour and turn as many of the assists off as you're comfortable with. A bit of traction control does remain handy, but you really want to get as close to the actual physics and the handling as you possibly can. I also feel that the racing itself has got a lot of common ground with previous years. The simple fact is that while real F1 drivers are now able to race almost nose to tail, humans and AI will drive in fundamentally different ways. They will brake at different points and they'll attack corners differently, so it's difficult to get the same effect from the real world in-game. At least the AI is pretty consistent though, and you'll want to keep online racers one 18-wheeler away from you if you don't want to get taken out into a corner. With a relatively settled season this year, Codemasters has been able to catch up with the real race calendar. There's a brand new Grand Prix with the Miami GP street circuit taking centre stage alongside the revised layouts for Spain, Abu Dhabi and Australia to catch up with the changes made in the last 18 months. Much of this has also been laser scanned to ensure that it is as accurate as it can possibly be. And there's also the still fresh Imola and Jeddah circuits which were added to F1 2021 in post-launch updates. If you skipped out on those updates, then they're basically brand new for you here. Just as important is how Codemasters has deepened their recreation of reality, in particular with the sprint race weekend captured in the game for the first time. They've also introduced formation laps, semi-manual pit stops where you have to hit the speed limiter before you get a penalty, time the turn into the box and then ready the clutch and launch just after the stop is done. And you've got a refinement of the safety car periods that can occur after incidents. These are all optional, with the game taking over if you want, or skipping some parts with a broadcast option, or you can also indulge yourself and do the whole thing manually. I think my main issue is that while doing a formation lap or a safety car restart absolutely ties into the fantasy, the reality feels a little bit less enthralling. On the formation lap, for example, there's none of the prescribed burnouts that Martin Brundle invariably comments on before a real race gets underway, and you've got catching up to do and following a safety car, which feels pretty stodgy, and the game does little to really teach you about matching a car's pace outside of a little video in the menus. It would be great to have these elements and the new pit stop systems in an easily practiced section of the game. I also never have any problems keeping my tyres up to temperature, despite the difficulties that drivers often have with this in reality. At the end of the day, it's all built around the very familiar foundations of F1 2021. The career in F1 22 looks and feels almost indistinguishable to its predecessor, even if some areas have been tweaked and expanded, so there's now things like the ability to start my team as a midfield or a front-running team. There's new multi-part decision points, and the R&D is now filled with upgrades that look like those for the 2022 cars, and stuff like this. F1 22 has also taken a bit of a step back with a range of additional content on offer around the main racing. Codemasters has tried a few ways to mix up the game's content over the years, periodically introducing and then removing a range of classic F1 cars, last seen in 2020, and featuring a well-produced and enjoyable story mode in F1 2021. For F1 22, it's F1 Life and supercars. F1 Life boils down to letting you just customize your avatar with some everyday clothes, fiddle with the interior design of a ludicrous and lavish home, and then unlock and play some supercars within its walls. Other player avatars will then come and visit you, and you can check out their spaces and the cars that they've unlocked and decided to place. It's clear that this is mainly fluff to fill out the podium pass of unlockables, and to give you a store for the Bitcoin's microtransactions currency. You can drive those supercars as well, whether it's in standard time trials or in the very prescribed Pirelli hot laps. There's 2 of these per track, drawing from different driving challenges like average speeds, time trials, rival races, and that kind of thing. And they're all accessible from the main menu or dropped into the calendar of your career at various points. But they're just so plain and lacking any kind of pizzazz. They're very structured, they often take small slices of a racetrack and then have you do this very, very short challenge 3 times in a row. There's just no ceremony to them, and I'd have loved to have seen something closer to the pre-race fluff pieces that F1's broadcasters are able to churn out, maybe ask you interview questions while you're driving, or something else that is a little bit out of the ordinary. The cars themselves are fairly fun to drive, a nice change of pace as they all feel like heavy and slow lumbering beasts when compared to the ultra-fast, ultra-grippy, ultra-downforce-y Formula 1 cars that you're normally racing. They're also good for driving these Astons, Ferraris, McLarens and Mercedes around tracks that you won't necessarily find in games like Gran Turismo, Assetto Corsa or Grid, but they're still kind of just off to the side, and if you want to drive these cars more regularly and in actual racing settings, you're going to be heading to those games over this one. F1 22 is like a slice of birthday cake a few days after the party. Someone, probably your dad, has pinched the glacé cherry from the cream splodge on top of the Black Forest gâteau, but your mum has put some bananas and apple slices on the plate to help to make up for it. The fruit doesn't really make sense, but the cake is still pretty good. Still, you're left dreaming of what next year's cake will be like. Maybe your cake engineer will be smart enough to now tell you if you're on pace to pull off a pit stop overcut, and maybe Will Buxton will get some new genes that don't look like they've been carved out of stone. Maybe it'll be a carrot cake. That's all that we've got for this review video of F1 22. The game is out on the 1st of July for regular versions of the game, but if you buy special edition versions of the game, you can get early access, which makes it available from the 28th of June. I hope that you found this video review nice and useful, and if you've made it this far, then please do consider clicking the like button, subscribing, clicking the bell icon if you want notifications when we do post more videos, and hopefully we will then see you again soon. Goodbye!